Have you ever wondered how we can find signs of God in life's darkest moments? Or marveled at a family's ability not just to survive, but to thrive after facing unimaginable tragedy? These questions are at the forefront of our minds when we meet such a family. So settle in and prepare for an emotional, inspiring, and life-altering experience. We're about to dive into the pages of the Leavitt family's extraordinary story, a tale that proves the resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering strength of faith. Introducing Jenny and Caleb, who will be your guides on this remarkable journey. They'll share a story that challenges conventions and inspires all who hear it.
All right, so hi everyone, we're back again, and I'm Jenny. This is Caleb, and we've been discussing the traumatic events that changed our life forever, before and after. If you've ever experienced anything traumatic, a bad diagnosis, anything, there's usually a day where your life changed from, you can say, well, that was before that happened, or that was after the accident. And our family has experienced that when that drunk driver hit you guys. T-boned you so hard that the front end of the Ford Escape was on fire and detached from the rest of the car.
Yeah.
So it was pretty bad. And we've been discussing right after the accident and rehab, and then now we're just talking about the shift that from when you were released from rehab and you were actually able to come home. And from my perspective as mom, I remember us doing everything we could to try to make the house where a wheelchair was accessible, because you came home in a wheelchair, and still had to do therapy a few times a week, still had to have a nurse come. You were still in the C-collar.
I think I was only in the wheelchair for about 3 weeks once I got home. And then we transitioned to the walker and then the cane after that, I believe.
Were you in a wheelchair Thanksgiving that year when we met the Martinez's?
I think so.
Yeah.
And so I think it was about then maybe a month, but I think I transitioned the first week of December to a walker, I believe.
I think so too, because we flew to Idaho for Christmas that year.
Which I was in a wheelchair, but I was just getting back and forth because I was still not walking very fast. So
and not super stable either.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, you had just been released to put weight on your left leg.
Yeah, I think it was December 6th they released me. If I remember correctly, it was December 6th when they released me.
So from my perspective as mom, I just remember being worried about you because I'm mom, and being worried about how everything would go. I remember how hard it was for me to even go back to church, which we are a family of believers who love Jesus and were very involved in our church and in our fellowship of churches. But right after the accident, your dad was able to go back fairly quickly. Like, you were in Brooks rehab, I think, the first time he went back, and he offered to have somebody come and stay with you so that I could go with him, and I didn't for a couple weeks, because as much as I loved our church and our church family had been there for us, like, they were the ones that came and relieved us and stayed the night with you so your dad could actually go home and get some sleep, and like, they were a super blessing, and brought us food. And so that wasn't it. My biggest thing was there were so many memories at the church. It was so hard for me to walk in, and really, if it wasn't for your dad and for Joyce, one of my really good friends, who basically, I kind of joke that they like bookended me the first several services that we did go to when you were still in Brooks, where your dad would walk in with me on one side, she would be on the other side, and that's how we would sit. And it really was just because they knew that the tears were just that far away anyway. And even when I had cancer, I couldn't stand it when people would pity me. Couldn't stand it. So I didn't want people coming up and being like, oh, I wanted people to be full of faith and try to be encouraging,
People can mean well, but what they think is helping you is really hindering you. And also it's just annoying sometimes, and you're like, I don't need that right now.
Yeah, I don't need the pity right now.
But you also can't voice that, which I did after the accident, because I was in a rough place. So I was in a rough, angry place, which kind of loops back to what I mentioned last video. I think the major transition was just getting back to real life. I think that's why it was so tough for me, is because now it was a reality. In the hospital, even at the rehab place, it's almost like I could imagine that this was somebody else's life. That I was just moving through it, doing what, I had to every day to recover, get better.
But even then, I remember you telling me that, because I know there were times that I would come in the morning and you were supposed to already be up and getting ready for your therapy, and I had to like push and prod. And I remember you telling me like there were just times that you just didn't want to deal with the day, So even in the rehab, I think it was hard for you. I mean, obviously it was hard, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think part of the difference is your dad and I still had to go home to the empty house, and we had to take the trash out, and we had to do all the stuff that like life still has to go on. The chores that you and your brother used to take care of, somebody had to do them, and so we had already had some time to kind of adjust to that, I think. And I think that might have been part of it, was now you're coming home and, like you said, reality is really...
Yeah. Reality of that, will this be my life forever? Because I have faith, and I've always been, you can call it stubborn, you can call it whatever you want, strong-willed, but I was always like, I'm going to walk again and all that, and I believed it, but that didn't take away the part that, would this still hurt every day, certain things? And the answer is yes, that, someday it does hurt. This is this much, metal going on, and surgeries and operations.
So to clarify, you mean physically?
Yes.
I'm sure there are some emotional and mental hurt as well, but you were talking about physically.
Yeah, at that point, but then once reality set in, then it became the emotional part of it, and the reality, because it was not like I was lying to myself, but I just didn't have the time or the effort or the energy to focus on the fact that I'm going to have to go through life now without my brother. Now, once you're back in the house, though, and you never see him because he's just not there anymore.
But his stuff there.
So, so that's all there, just that reality coming out of that, where it's almost like you can hide it or you can avoid the truth because you're not at your house where the memories are. But then you go back and you realize, okay, this is my new life. This is it. And then kind of going back, so then the Christmas, we had that big old fight, and I'm back in the bedroom, and you walked in there, and I think that's kind of almost like whenever like the dam broke through, like the first time. And I remember I just grabbed you and then hugged you, and I was like, was it my fault? Was it my fault? And somebody who I've tried to think, I forgave them a while ago, but I don't really know what your thought process is in doing that. Somebody has sent me a news article sharing with me that the cops were still blaming me for the accident. And so that was like beginning of December, like maybe November, whenever that was. In that time, so we're talking about 3 months after the fact, and the cops are still blaming me and saying it was my fault for the accident. So, like I said, I don't know why they sent that, but that's kind of playing into it too. And so then I'm just carrying all this guilt around, which now is finally being realized in my life, in my mind, in my spirit even. And I'm trying to wrestle with it, and I don't know what to do. And because I had bitterness, anger, resentment that had built up before the accident, and now I have no kind of outlet because I haven't dealt with that healthily, a healthy way. So now it's just compounding on it, and it's building and building and building. And that's where I think the first part, because even up to that point, I hadn't really thought about the other guys that had hit us. I hadn't, because you're so focused on just recovery, but then I began to think about them, and that's where hatred really began to seep in. And it would just be nights where I would lay in bed and I would think about how I wanted to hurt them, make them feel the same kind of pain that we felt, and then to kill them. And so I'm thinking about these sick thoughts, and just murderous thoughts and stuff, and I didn't have a healthy way to deal with it at that point in my life. And so I'm still going to church, going to Bible study, not really back involved.
Can I ask you, what was it like the first time you went to church?
Yeah, so I would say apprehensive, which if you know me, and I would
not ever think of you as shy or apprehensive.
Yes, but I think it's because in my consciously, I didn't even know, because I hadn't dealt with it enough yet. But the spiritual part of me knew that there was a hatred there towards them that they hit us, but also towards God. So I didn't want to go. I felt like I had to. So I went and I put on the face that I'm doing well, getting better. Then altar call comes, and I don't want to go up there. And so Dad asked me, "Hey, you want to go up?" And I said no. And he was like, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Because I don't want to be up there right now." And Dad said, "Well, because you don't, that means that you really need to go up there." And I was like, "I don't want to go up there." So Dad basically said, You need to, come on. So he wheeled me up there. I didn't really talk to God at all. I just kind of sat there and looked around. And honestly, I don't know how long that kind of lasted, but that was my experience, I guess. And then at least for the next couple months, I was, let's say, I had no tact for at least a few months. So people would come up. I remember a story of, a friend of mine, walked up to me. I may have been in the wheelchair, but at least on the walker still. And he comes up and he's like, oh man, I feel so bad today, man. I've had this cold and just went off. I'm like, oh yeah, must be nice because, you can walk, right? And so, your bones aren't broken, right? You're not wearing this, right? It's like, you must be good though, right? He's like, well, dang, bro. And then walked away. So that was kind of most of my interaction with others. Never,
So for those of you that don't know Caleb personally, when Caleb was growing up, one of the things that I used to tell him was, filter son, got to engage the filter.
Yeah, and then I would say, well, somebody gave me a filterectomy and took it right off.
We actually had a comic on the side of our refrigerator at that house we lived in. Yeah. Remember? We cut it out of the paper because it was something about they'd had a filterectomy in their brain and they had removed so there was no filter.
Yep, sounds like me.
So I think we're going to wrap up this video, but the next one I would like to, if you're okay with it, I would like to go back to what changed that you were not so, what was there a breakthrough? Was there something that helped you get out of that? Because obviously you're not a bitter, angry man now.
Only towards my wife. Just kidding.
And she's the one videoing, in case you guys are wondering. So we're gonna wrap this one up here, and we'll see you all in a few minutes.
In our next episode, we'll delve deeper into the moments that led to this transformation. We'll explore the breakthroughs and shifts in thinking that helped him move from bitterness and anger to the resilient and hopeful person he is today. Don't miss out on this inspiring chapter of our story. Subscribe to our channel and let's continue this incredible journey together.